G'day folks. Well, over the years we have filmed hundreds of incredibly talented people across the world. Many of these artists have gone on to produce their own videos as well. We hope you enjoy this great lesson from one of our Colour in Your Life artists.
I want to thank Graham Stevenson and his crew at Put Some Colour in Your Life for giving me this opportunity to bring to you on his channel a 3-part painting of a landscape in oils. I'm going to walk you through, there'll be 3 videos in total. The first one will be quite detailed as I've got tons of spare camera people on hand, whereas the last 2 will probably be voiceover, and I'll probably speed up some of the footage as well because the painting goes on for hours and hours, but I'll make sure that you hear all the important information and instruction as we go through it. Let's see if we can get this painting going. Something I learned really early in my career as a painter was that if I put a story or an element of a story into my painting, that work had far more appeal with the viewers than if I didn't. And it became apparent fairly quickly. The reason it was easy for me is because I actually was quite a storyteller from when I was a little child. I thought in stories, I dreamed in stories, so it wasn't hard for me to actually surrender to that obvious blaring fact that people liked stories in their paintings. And it surprises me that more artists don't put narrative into their work. Anyway, they're the mysteries that be, so let's get on with this painting. What I'm going to do, and I don't always do this, is I'm going to speed this oil painting on canvas up with an acrylic base, and it's completely fine to put acrylic underneath your oil paintings, just as long as you remember to make sure that they're bone dry before you put the oil paint on top. I've got a lot more on that in my oil painting workshop on the stability factors. But before I put my acrylic on, I want to just give myself a really rough guide with charcoal as to what the composition is and where it's going to land on the canvas. One of the very important factors about developing a painting right at the very start is put a little bit of thought into the composition. And I like to stick to a few basic rules. One of my favourites, and it's a no-lose one, is the rule of thirds. And the idea is basically what you do is you divide your canvas up into thirds. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, and the same across into a grid. And you can just do it by eye. You get very used to knowing it. The rule of that is to actually put points of interest in those places. Because I'm going to paint a little landscape with water in the front and a boat with a man and a dog, which will create the story, I'm going to actually give all the elements a sort of an equal value. One of the things to avoid is to put your horizons right in the centre at the halfway mark. That usually, it doesn't quite give any tension in the work. In my case, I'm going to get the charcoal and map it out. I've already given myself a few ideas, and then I'll fix it and with some fixative, and then I'm going to go in with the acrylic. So let's get going. So I'm just going to have, I've worked out that my third points are about there, and I think I had one here, and here, and here. So that's the thirds. So I'm going to put a lot of tension around here on this spot here, which is actually going to be where my boat is. And I only need a very rough, this isn't going to be a perfect, realistic painting. I don't want that. I just want it to be characterful, just a little man, little classic image that I do. I don't like doing the same painting over and over again. It's just not my thing. But for the sake of demonstrating, I've picked an idea that I know will be popular. So I'll just put a little dog there. That's the activity that's sitting in that little third quarter. Now I think I'm going to have my waterline about there, right? So not halfway. I'm going to have a bit of landscape in the back. So this is going to be water at the front, a bit of landscape here, just fading back, and this is the other third, and I'm just going to put my mountains. You don't necessarily put an object on every third. That's sort of not what to do. But as it turns out, that sits at about a third. I'm going to have a lovely big tree here to counterbalance. So then I'm working with some other compositional rules, and again, I go into them in detail in my landscape workshop, but this one is the steel yard idea or the counterbalance. So I'm going to have a big shape here, just a rough sort of drawing of a tree, if you like, and it'll have some blah blah up there. And then I'm going to have that sort of little aspect here. I might just put a little barn or something in the background. That will just give it a bit of perspective. So I'm just going to draw a rough. I'll see. Again, sometimes I put things in and then I move them because they don't look right when I'm doing it. I just feel like it needs maybe a little shape of something there. Sometimes I put shapes in, I don't know what they're actually going to be. I mean, logic dictates what it might be, but it feels like I need a bit of weight there. All right, so that's me just mapping out a rough idea because the bulk of the work will be done with the paint. What I'm doing here is actually mapping out the key areas for the composition so I don't forget and end up with everything all cramped down here or up here in the middle. I just think that if you get your rules down first, it helps set you up and gives you more freedom as you're going through and painting. And I've just got some fixative here, just a workable fixative, not a varnish. Fix that a bit. Make sure it dries before you put the acrylic paint on. So I'm just going to do this fairly quickly, this section, because the bulk of the workshop will be focused on the actual oil painting. I've just put some acrylic paint on my palette here. I'm going to use a great big brush. I usually use a bigger one than this. This is just a paste brush, but you can use a house brush or whatever. The bigger the better, I find, because it stops you fussing around. You don't want to fuss around. This is actually meant to be quite loose and flowing and, you know, dripping water and all the rest of it. So I'm going to zoom through this. The idea of doing this underpainting is that it gives you it's like a lovely warm tone underneath the oil. And I'm just going to be using a combination of Indian yellow, it's a red, gold, sienna and other bright colours. I'll put them in the materials list, so don't worry, you'll be able to follow along. In my other Colour in Your Life workshop, I went through this process as well, so you can have a look at that. Just search my name on the Colour in Your Life YouTube. Just make sure that you don't fuss with this. Keep it very loose. The bigger brush, the better. And slop it on because the idea is to get it done fast. All right, that should do. Okay, so I'm just going to go and put that outside to dry. And then when that's dry, bone dry, I'm going to come in and we're going to get cracking into the oils. All right, we're ready to get started on the oil painting. I just wanted to show you something that I thought about just when I was getting the acrylic dry. This is all I used when I was planning the painting, a tiny little thumbnail. It really is all you need. It's just so small. And it was just mapping out the ideas. One of the great things is when you're not doing, not trying to do realism, you should put more weight on composition really, because then you can take license with your mad ideas, especially with narrative ideas. If you get the composition right, it'll probably work out pretty good. So let's get started. I've got the sky first. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and work down the canvas. I'll probably fast forward now and again to keep us rolling. So let's start up the top. My palette, I've just squeezed out some colours. I'm going to put those colours in there. Phthalo blue. I've got some Payne's grey and a couple of magenta colours, pinky colours. Again, they're going to be in there, and some white. I use Liquin, which is a fabulous fast-drying medium, and I'm going to blob a big blob of it right in the middle. I'll probably go through all of that. I use quite a lot of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix up a little bit of, the Payne's grey actually doesn't need much medium. As you can see, it's quite loose. And I'm going to dive straight in. I go into more detail about how to paint cumulus clouds in my cloud workshop, which is very specifically about painting these clouds. So picking up a whole load of it, and I've actually just pencil drawn some cloud shapes. You probably can't make out what's going on here, but that's why I've got my little pen sketch down there to remind me. And my method for this is just to use some really strong Payne's grey in the base of the clouds. I know I've got trees and things there, but I'll find them later on. And I'm just putting that Payne's grey dark colour where the rain might be down in the bottom of the cloud. It's a little bit dry there, but that's okay. I want it to be fairly thin, and it'll be peeking through. Just scumbling it away there. Okay, and Normally a painting like this would take me about 3 or 4 days, but over a period of time to do. So as I said, I am going to be moving fairly fast through it. I have terps ready so I can just wash my brush out. I just wanted to clean that off a bit. I'm going to go in with a bit of white, titanium white. Okay, and just straight in at the top. There's so many different ways to paint clouds. This is just one of them. And it's because we're in a hurry. Okay, I'm going to find this one here. I find that clouds are best painted in oils over a couple of days because it's best when it dries off. You can then come and really touch up your highlights. So I'm just putting some top fluffy clouds there. I think I might be going into the tree a bit there. All right, we'll keep them nice and dramatic for now. Payne's grey is quite an inferior colour, so it doesn't take much to knock it back into a lighter tone. All right, so I think I'll just to there. Wiping out with my rags. I do a lot of wiping back. Often I do the work with just the side of the brush like that. I'm just blending a little bit, but try to move around. Don't make it just one big, blurry blob. It doesn't do much service to the forces of nature like that. Okay, so I've just brought a bit of light colour now. I'm going to leave them quite dramatic for a minute, and I'm going to move away from those clouds and into the sky. Now I'm going to mix my phthalo blue into the white. I'm just going to use this for my sky colour. I use different colours for the sky, but phthalo blue is so strong. It makes a big mess. Look at that. I only had a scrape on there and it's made that beautiful blue. So I'll bring that white in and really splodge it around. So I think you've got to be just very careful. You're probably better off starting with a pile of white and just putting a tiny bit of blue into it at a time. It's very strong. It's got a very strong staining capacity. In the top of the sky, I want it to be quite strong. People use different blues. You can use, I've got a lovely one called Tasman blue. That's a pre-mixed colour. Some people use cerulean, or they mix their colour with cobalt. But for this one, this phthalo blue with just white gives a lovely bright sky. I'm going to make it quite strong in the top, and I'm going to be grading it down as it goes downwards. All right. Just really mix it up. Okay, put a bit more liquid in. And I'm going to be needing a lighter colour as it goes towards the horizon. So I might as well just mix a bit of that over here at the same time while I've got everything moving. So I've got 2 little piles of paint. Okay. Now, clean your brush. Make sure you've got no grotty business in it. And I'm going up into the sky. Straight in. Just loosen it up with liquid as you need. This is a very bright blue. As you can see, it's a quite happy, fun blue. You can drop it back down, as I said, with a little bit of the either ultramarine blue or cobalt blue. Okay, so I'm just going to stay with this one tone up here at the top to keep it easy. Right, and I'm going to hit up against, just touch on that white. It's going to look a bit cookie cutter to start, but don't worry, we'll fix that up when we come back to it from the cloud back into the sky. What I'm doing is I'm just going, I know there's going to be some clusters of tree branches, tree foliage in there, so I'm just sort of going around them a little bit and keeping loose. I'll pick them out later on. What I want to do is just I want to point out that I need to drop the grade down of the colour as it comes down. So what I do is I pick a point where it's going to sort of start to change. So and I run it right across. So I'm going to say I'm going to drop the grade, the tone. It's the light and darkness of it, about there. So I draw myself a bit of a pretend line. It's a good place to do it there because I've got the cloud there, and it's about there. So it's going to drop down there. Then I can either start down here and work back up from the lightest tone at the horizon and work up, or you can sort of bring a mid-tone in and then go to a light tone. Because I've got my light tone mixed on my palette, I might just go down. I know it's a bit of mucking around, but I'll start with the light tone down on the horizon. And that is here. And I've just put in a little bit of a mountain range, which I've just invented across there. Put a very light tone there. Again, it's totally out of the imagination. Okay. I think after painting landscapes for decades, you end up with a kind of a metaphor of a landscape in your mind, and that's why I can do things out of the imagination, but I do refer back to pictures and photos because otherwise everything would just look the same. That's the brightest light, and now I can just bring in a little bit of the next one, the darker colour, and start to ease it up. I have actually got some clouds in here. I'm just going to go, because they're cumulus, they kind of flatten out as they go off into the distance. Just bringing in a little bit of the darker colour. And because I'm using this paint quite dry, this isn't thick, this paint. Remember, I've got that lovely yellow underpainting there, which actually makes it even warmer. So I'm pulling in some of the darker into there as I ease it up, using the back of the brush or the side of it to sort of scumble. You'll be able to hear that scruffy sound as I scumble my way up. Now it might be a little bit thin, but it's only one colour. It's only white with phthalo, so I can easily come back in another layer later on and darken it. But I kind of like the warm colour glowing through. I could have put those clouds in, but now let's just take it up a little bit further and bring in a bit more of the darker tone of the phthalo blue and bump in underneath that cloud. What have I got there? I think that's a bit of a tree there. Just hit up there, but just make sure when you're bumping into the dark tone when it's all wet that you don't mix it all up yet. Just hit it and get out. Otherwise you'll end up with no actual differentiation between your blue and your cloud. We will be blending it a little bit. I've sort of lost my tree there. I think it goes up here. All right. If you wanted to, you could just have 3 blends, 3 tones of your blue on your palette if it makes it easier for you. Just depends on how much sky you've got. The idea is to keep working across the canvas. I've just got tree foliage there. Just because if you're working across it, you're taking the tone up gradually. So I'm just bringing the 2 together. And because I have done, the fixing of the charcoal, it doesn't matter if I, see how I'm just going over, because it helps, I can blend it better if I can just go straight over it. You don't have to fuss around trying to go around the edges there, just go over the top. But the paint is thin, so it's not going to affect us. Don't completely blot it out. You can see what you're working with there. I need to stand back and have a look at how I'm going. Right, so now just quickly pop those clouds in, wiping. Just a bit of white. So just going to hit that back up again now, because we're doing this in one session. I would definitely not come back at this without this drying a little bit. but we need to get it done. So I've come in with a bit of neat white, and occasionally you'll get the clouds sort of disappear into the sky like that. So you can just sort of blend them out, and then you'll have very crisp areas. Right. What I do is the next day is I always wait till this is dry or fairly dry, and then I'll come back with a little bit of beautiful yellow, put that into some white, and it really gives it a boom, a beautiful highlight into your whites. So, as I said, just not too much blending. Just remembering that clouds are not just one big fluffy ball, they're a sort of a whole lot of shapes all in one. Just going to blend that out at the bottom so that it's a bit of a disappearing shape. Whereas sometimes you see clouds just zooming off. Now don't go back in with all that paint on there because it'll put the stain into your blue. You're better off to clean your brush and then bring it up to meet it. All right, we're just going to keep it loose. Really feel like I might come back to those clouds towards the end of the painting and just touch them up. But that gets us started. That gives us a good head start. Right. Now I want to mix this colour in the background, and it just, mountains are different colours. So I'm going to go over to my palette and I'm going to just mix in, I've got some, where is it? Where's my ultramarine blue? Completely can't see it. So I've got some ultramarine blue, and I just love ultramarine. You can just fall back on it for everything. And I guess I might need to clean my palette up in a minute. So I'll just mix a bit of that and a bit of alizarin crimson and a bit of white. Sometimes a really nice thing to do in your background, oh, that's a bit sloppy, in your background hills is to actually add in a little tiny bit of olive green, and it just dulls it down a little bit. I love olive green. It's in Artist Spectrum. It's one of my favourites. Sometimes in the Kimberleys, the background in the northwest of Australia, the background hills were actually this luscious cobalt blue, just pure cobalt blue. So beautiful, hard to imagine. All right, so now they're not going to be just one big blob. So if you watch what I'm doing here, I'm pushing up and I'm hitting that wet sky. One of the good things about working wet in wet is that you can utilise the blending of the wet layers. So in this case, I've got the horizon sky. I'm just scrubbing into it, and you're going to have a little bit of sort of lost and found there, as you would if you had a mountain range. It's nowhere in particular, it's just an idea, as I said before. Lost and found, something big there. It's got to make sense, so just blur your eyes as you're making it. And that sort of brings in different tones because some of it's picked up the light colour. And then I pop in a little bit darker. So I'm grabbing a bit of neat ultramarine blue, and I'll just sort of pop a bit of that in there with some olive green. Get the two colours together. And because that's wet, it's just mixing into the existing colour, and it sort of creates a little bit of a different texture. Because you've got, again, the yellow underneath, that warmth comes through, especially if you're painting. Look at that, that's quite dry. See how you can hear that? That's scrubbing the paint on. And I'm using what's underneath. So it doesn't necessarily have to all be painted. The only thing is I've got drips there, so I'm going to have to get rid of those. That wouldn't make any sense in the background. Right, but see how that allows those light areas probably have a look really close. See how you can see those really light areas coming through? So it's the colour underneath, but of course the tone in the background would be lighter, so I have to remember that. But if I wipe that back, you see how you can get... You've got to remember though that in the distance the colour will be cooler and it will get warmer in the front. So I don't want it to be, you know, really warm, so we do need the paint to be covering it. Coming back to my palette, I have to think about changing the tone and bringing it forward, and I've got to decide what I'm going to do here, whether I'm going to put a tree line in or something along those lines. I think I might have a sort of a value change here where it could be a line of trees or something, just to make it a bit interesting. So I've got my palette knife and I'm just pulling across. Right, so I'm just going to put that in there, just with a brush, scrumbling it in. And I'm thinking that might be a tree line of some sort, maybe. I don't know, we'll see. I make it up as I go. Getting a bit more olive green. I think I'll lighten that olive green. Right, so I'm just using olive green and blue, ultramarine blue, and I'm putting a bit of white in it. You can barely see that, and that's exactly how I want it. Just very faint. So I've kind of established a dark there. I think I like that. It just feels like a little distant row of trees. I think I might now bring some sort of foregroundy colours in, and for that I'm going to clean my palette back a little bit because it's such a mess and I'm using up all the space. And I'm going to mix up, I need lots of titanium white. And I think I'm going to use some raw sienna on the side. And I always use my trusty red gold, Australian red gold. Again, that's an artist spectrum colour. Olive green, sap green's probably going to work as well. Okay, now I'm going to do a bit of fun mixing. I'm looking for a light tone in the background for, say, some grasses in the background. But I want a little bit of that faded look, so I'm going to bring a tiny bit of that bluey colour in. Yeah, that's better. I wanted it to be really bright. That's better. All right, so just get that across there, keeping it across. Just using the palette knife to speed things up a bit. The trouble is if you just plaster it on like that, it ends up flat, so I don't want that. That's too sharp there, so just pull that out. Again, too sharp. There we go. Now I think from my idea I had a sort of a bit of a jutting piece of greenery there. Might switch brushes, and I think I'll dive in with a bit of olivey green and say a darker value, just to keep it interesting. A bank of trees or something across there. Where's my olive green? Olive green, raw sienna, earthy colours. It looks like a bit of a mess and not much as you're going, but it comes together when you start sort of moving. You've just got to keep going. Don't worry about getting things perfect when you first start. For example, I can just go up here. I'm using a bit of blue and a bit of olive green, and I'm just going to throw in just a bit of foliage shapes in there. And I know it looks like a big blob, but don't worry, because I can come and pull out some of the blue shapes later rather than fuss with them now. And that's why it's always good to do it over a couple of days if you can. But you can get around it. We'll see how we go when we get there. Okay, so just putting a bit of shape as I've got that on my brush anyway. Olive green's great. So now I'm really just using the the two colours, the ultramarine blue and the olive green, like a lot. Actually, you know what? I might even just put some in here because I'm definitely going to be using it down there in that area. So this is going to be the bank of the river or whatever it is. And trying to see what I've got there shape-wise. It's kind of like blocking in the values and it all starts to make sense. Don't get overwhelmed. It feels like, I think a lot of painters when they're first starting out, they want to sort of get it perfect right at the beginning, and that just isn't how it works. Well, it might be for some, but it doesn't work for me like that. And I think after you do enough paintings, you sort of get the confidence of going, I know this is a bit messy right now, or it doesn't look right, but it's just paint. You can go over it, or you can wipe it off. What have I got there? Olive green. Get some nice darks in there. And remember, one of the great things about this is, I want to show you, is that you can actually wipe out, you see. So you could, you know, wipe in some branches or something like that. That's while it's wet. Okay, so I think I perceived that I had some more foliage in here. Just coming in there, and I might have a little space there. I need to bring some fast action in here. Well, that's the end of part one of this 3-part special for Put Some Colour in Your Life, where I paint an oil painting from start to finish, every step. There's 2 more parts coming, very interesting and fun. So stay tuned for those next. And don't forget, I've got other oil painting workshops and acrylic and watercolour, which I teach online. You can go to my website, the link should be below, and you can have a look at what's on offer. But one of them in particular is a lengthy and comprehensive oil workshop that covers just about everything you could want to know about oil paint. Especially good if you've never painted in oils before, or you just need polishing up on your skills. I cover everything from the technical side of, you know, it's fun though, don't worry, it's not boring. What's in the paint, the history of it, as well as the pragmatic stuff, because we paint a complete painting, but we do it in real time with very detailed instructions. All right, let's get on to parts 2 and 3 of this special oil painting YouTube workshop. And don't forget, in the meantime, put some colour in your life. See you soon.